D&D number 8, Juneflower in Jesus' Name, Chapter 4. It's present day, late February, Kampala, Uganda. Cam had watched Jeffy on the terrace as she'd stood in the moonlight, waiting for her time to speak. She had been beautiful in the moonlight. Mr. Armandi had come to tell her it was time to speak, and Jeffy had seemed apprehensive, which had put Cam on high alert. Her instincts were usually right on, and Cam could never simply shrug them off. As lovely as she looked up on stage at this moment, he could tell from her furrowed brow and increased respiration that all was not right. Jeffy's large brown eyes scanned the crowd. She felt uneasy. Usually she had no problem with being in front of people. However, today it seemed there were too many eyes looking too deep. She'd held everyone's attention as she'd given her carefully worded speech. At the end, she offered to entertain a few questions. She'd been answering them for the better part of an hour now. Drawing a deep breath, she zeroed in on the man who had worked his way to the front of the microphone. Just so I can be sure to explain this correctly to my readers, in a nutshell, what are you saying about the pharmaceutical companies? I'm not saying anything about the companies, she reiterated. What I said in a nutshell is drugs are Band-Aids. They do not address the cause of disease. We are barking up the wrong tree. We have to step into a new paradigm. We have to think outside the box. That's all I'm saying for now. But I believe you're out of questions, she said, her brows raised. She smiled at the man standing behind him. You had a question? Could you address diabetes? I can. And this will be the last question. A groan went up. Jeffy smiled sweetly. Now, as I stated earlier about diabetes, most of the things we have diabetics do to treat their illness are the things that perpetuate the disease. Cam worked his way in front of the man with the question about the pharmaceutical companies and snapped off a few pics. He was the 11th person Cam felt was a person of interest. Cam rattled off the man's name into his mic and continued to circle the room. Within a few minutes, the other agents, other members of Jason's elite, would know whether to detain those Cam had singled out. He turned his attention back to Jeffy as she spoke about diabetes. Conscious of reporters and television cameras, she'd given a perfectly rousing and intimidating speech to the medical community. She'd praised their efforts and led them to believe that they were thinking like herself and on her side, and made it clear that eventually there would be a clean sweep of all the ridiculous rhetoric. She did it so sweetly and so succinctly, yet she made the world feel as if they were all co-conspirators with her. Once she'd turned the time over for questions, Cam became very busy. The very first question came from a man in the front row. So, are you saying that you've been working on your research this entire last year? Jeffy denied doing any research in any of her labs. Cleverly, she led everyone to believe that she'd merely had lots of time for soul-searching and to clear her mind as to how to go about some things. If the little speech she'd made tonight alarmed her enemies, they would know soon enough. This time, however, the family and close friends were on the highest level security alert. Cam's eyes narrowed as he saw Dr. Munna speak briefly to Mr. Ormandi, who then turned quickly to leave the room. Jeffy had just finished her lecture and was shaking hands and mingling with a few of the hobnobs present. Munna approached her. Jeffy smiled at him and nodded and patted his shoulder kindly, and Munna nodded and moved away, approached the bar and ordered a drink. Cam had checked out Dr. Munna months ago. Still, his behavior warranted another look. He keyed his mic. Tony, do me a favor and keep an eye on Munna at the bar. I want to know his every move. Will do, Tony replied. Cam waited another few minutes before he lifted his arm and pointed at his watch, and immediately Agents Coley and Akins closed rank around Jeffy. Time to get on the road, Dr. Keno, Coley said softly. Jeffy nodded. She was only too glad to get back to the camp. Good. I am so ready to get out of here. I'm not feeling very well. Both agents were immediately alarmed. Coley bent down and peered into her eyes. What's wrong? Did you drink or eat anything that we didn't give to you? No, I was a good girl. I just have a headache. I think I'm a little dehydrated. But, she paused and looked around. There is something else. I don't know. I just want to get back to camp. Well, the jeeps are being brought around now, and the rest of our party is being notified to head toward the front entrance. The chopper is only 20 minutes away, Agent Akins stated. Well, thank goodness for that, Jeffy said, as she brought her hand up to press against her forehead. Would you mind getting me a bottle of water? Is the headache getting worse? Not sure I can call it a headache. It's like a pressure in my head, like I'm underwater. It's very strange. Akins ran to do her bidding as Coley helped her toward the entrance. She suddenly turned toward the agent. Chris? Are you okay? He smiled at her. You're always worrying about everyone else. I'm fine. You just get yourself feeling better. The large drive in front of the hotel was filled with taxis and jeeps and trucks and limos. In only a few minutes, Jeffy was ushered into one of the jeeps. Coley took the wheel, Akins sat shotgun, and Jeffy and Dr. Todd sat in the back. The second jeep was driven by Gretchen, with Nurse Ada right beside her as usual. In the back seat of their jeep was Donald McTally. The seat beside McTally had been occupied by Dr. Mona on the drive-in. It was now empty. Cam and another agent occupied a third vehicle which followed just out of sight. It would take them only 15 minutes to get to the heliport. He would breathe a little easier once he saw Jeffy off on the chopper. As they pulled away from the hotel, Jeffy drank water and chatted with Dr. Todd. I have to say, June, you were impressive tonight. Jeffy smiled at him. Thank you, Richard. She really didn't feel much like talking, but decided it would be a distraction to the uneasiness she was feeling. So tell me, she said idly, what was it that impressed you so much? Well, he said, stretching his arm out around her and leaning close, it seems the little genius is not only book smart, you're people smart too. You had everyone eating out of your hands. Jeffy gave a soft laugh. Well, I appreciate the compliment, but the people smart part comes from my family, not me. They're the pros at working the crowd and saying just the right thing. Are you saying they helped you write your speech? Oh, absolutely. I need all the help I can get. I'm walking a very thin tightrope, Richard. If I say or do the wrong thing, I could hurt a lot of people. Instead of helping to save lives, I could push the medical world back 20 years. I have to play it just right, and socially, I'm a little backward. You're kidding. No, I'm quite serious. I had a hard time making friends when I was young. I mean, while other little girls were playing with Barbies, I was contemplating physics. I found it almost impossible to focus on a little plastic doll and play make-believe. My make-believe was traveling through the universe at 100 times the speed of light, or pretending I had the power to use my mind to heal someone. How sad. No, I wasn't sad at all. My parents and siblings taught me to find joy in every moment. I was filled with joy. I still am. All I'm saying is I've struggled with relationships. Only a few very understanding people outside of my family have stood beside me while I was being an annoying nerd. Like my best friends, Kimmy and Marissa. It's funny, actually. I've studied and understood the psychology of man, but in real situations, I'm a bit awkward. And how about boyfriends? Did you have many? No, just one to speak of. And I don't want to talk about him. Ah, he broke your heart. I didn't say that. You didn't have to. It's all over your face. Well, my father will not be happy that I am so easily read. Richard laughed. So, your family helped you to write your speech. They helped me to decide how much information to give and how gently to deliver that information. They helped me to put together the exact way I need to present my findings to the world so that psychologically the world will be ready and willing to hear what I have to say. And what is it you have to say? Jeffy shook her head with a grin. Oh, no. You'll have to wait like everyone else. He chuckled. Why did I know you were going to say that? It all happened so fast. A shot rang out. Agent Coley grunted and slumped over. Jeffy screamed. Agent Akins grabbed for the wheel, but it was too late. The Jeep ran off the road and flipped on its side. Jeffy felt her body go airborne, felt the pain as she hit the dirt and rolled to a stop. Chris. I have to get to Chris, Jeffy thought frantically, willing her body to move. For some reason, she couldn't see where she was going. Chris, I can't find you. She was crawling on her belly across gravel and dirt. Chris! She felt arms wrap around her, pulling her across the dirt, and then a warm body covered hers. Chris, I have to help him, she cried. Shh, now, it's me. It's Hart. Listen to me, Jeffy. Chris is right here. Dr. Todd is working on him. Richard is working on him? Then Richard is okay? A little banged up is all, Richard answered. How bad is Chris? What's happening? Chris is alive, but his lung has collapsed, Dr. Todd answered, breathing heavily as he worked on Agent Coley. She wiped at her eyes. I can't see. I need to see. Hart lifted himself slightly away from her and peered down at her. You hit your head, Jeffy. There's blood running down your forehead into your eyes. He reached down and grabbed the hem of her evening gown, pulled it up, and used it to wipe her face and eyes. Jeffy blinked, struggled to get out from under the man. Get off me, Hart. I have to help Chris. I told you, Dr. Todd is working on him. Now be still, he said, pressing his body against her as shots were fired, hitting in the wooded area just past them. Jeffy realized they were crouched down behind the upturned Jeep. She tensed as Hart raised up away from her, squeezed off a couple of shots, and lowered himself back down on top of her. She pushed against him. Let me help you. I can help. Hart held her still. Jeffy, there's nothing you can do to help right now except to just be still and let me do my freaking job, he said crossly. He put a finger to his earpiece. Roger that. Who are you talking to? Jeffy asked. Another agent. They were following in a third vehicle. Jeffy gasped as she suddenly remembered her friends in the second Jeep. Oh, Gretchen, Ada, are they okay? McT. They're okay. One of the agents from the third car is with them. They've taken cover on the side of their vehicle. Oh, thank goodness Dr. Mona stayed behind. Yeah, right. I wonder why he did. Well, I suggested that he stay and get some rest at the hotel for a few days. He's been a little out of sorts. You told him to stay? It wasn't his idea? Correct. Why? When he didn't answer, she put two and two together. You think he planned this ambush? Well, it crossed my mind. No, it wasn't him. I know. Well, I can guarantee Jason will be looking into it. Jeffy tried to turn around, but Hart held her still. I'm so worried about Chris. Richard, how bad is he? Hard to tell. He's losing a lot of blood. She pushed against Hart. Let me up. No freaking way, Jeffy. Now be still. I thought you guys were wearing vests. We are. The bullet entered just under his arm, Richard said, grunting as he pulled his own shirt off to help staunch the flow of blood. So what are we going to do? Jeffy cried. Just hide here behind the Jeep and hope they run out of bullets while Chris bleeds to death? No. One of the other agents has moved into the woods to take care of the problem. One? How many gunmen are there? I'm guessing 4. What makes you think that? I can see fire from at least 2, but they're not trying to hit us. Not trying. Chris is hit, she screamed. Well, they meant to hit him to stop us. All the other fire is going high over our heads and hitting in the woods behind us. That means they're trying to keep us pinned down so that at least one more bad guy can make his way to us. But I think he wouldn't work alone, so I say there are 2 more. That makes 4. And the guys making their way to us, what do they intend to do? Well, they think they can just walk in here and take me out and take you away. In other words, Jeffy, they want you alive. Jeffy thought a moment. Well, then, let me up. If I go with them, they won't hurt you and we can get Chris to a hospital. I'm not letting you up, Jeffy. They can't have you. I said they think they can take me out. They can't. I will protect you with my life. I'm ordering you to get off me, she cried. Well, I don't take my orders from you, he growled. Now, be quiet so I can hear what the agent who went in might need me to do. One guy? You're letting one guy go in there looking for 4 assassins? Well, he's not just any guy. He's very good at what he does. At that moment, a cry of pain filled the jungle. Oh no, now what, huh, Hart? That wasn't him. They heard a rifle fire. Then 2 more quick shots and another cry. Hart stilled as he listened to the message coming through his earpiece. He nodded. Roger that, Scott. He lifted his body off Jeffy. Come on, let's go. The second jeep pulled up to them, driven by the agent who had been with Cam. Hart lifted Jeffy and tossed her onto the now cramped vehicle, then turned to help Dr. Todd lift Agent Coley into the jeep. Go, 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 Hart yelled. Just 2 miles down the road, the group was loaded into the chopper. Jeffy finally got a look at Chris, who was now being worked on by 3 extremely brilliant doctors. She wanted to help, but for some reason, it seemed like no one could hear anything she was trying to say. Just before they lifted into the air, she saw the agent who'd driven the jeep the last few miles and turned the jeep around and headed back out. She figured he was going to see about the agent who'd so bravely gone into the woods and apparently taken out the gunman. She looked up toward the pilot, who was talking rapidly. Her eyes darted back to Chris, who was being stripped. The doctors worked on him, seeming to be moving in fast forward. She turned her head to find Hart. He was smiling and nodding at her and pushing her down. Unable to resist, she let her body fall backward. She blinked several times and focused in on Ada's face, which seemed to be floating over her. Ada was speaking to her, but Jeffy couldn't hear her words. Jeffy's stomach began to heave, and she couldn't keep the contents from rising. Her field of vision narrowed, turning gray around the edges, then bright white, and finally black. New scene. Wake up for me now, Gretchen was saying softly. Jeffy felt a cool cloth on her forehead. She moaned as she tried to move and stretch her sore muscles. Her eyes blinked open to see Gretchen's beautiful smiling face. There now, Jeffy, how are you feeling? Jeffy moaned. I feel like I've been through the air like a human missile. I feel like I've been thrown through the air like a human missile. That's because you have, she said with a chuckle. You hit your head pretty hard. You have a concussion, but you're going to be okay. You just need to take it easy for a few days. She blinked as she took in the information and then gasped suddenly. Chris, is he okay? He's going to make it. We left him in the hospital in Kampala. Alone? No, he's not alone, Agent Aiken said from somewhere behind Gretchen. How bad is he? Jeffy asked. The bullet entered and exited his left lung, nicked his right lung, and exited through his back. Gretchen answered. Right now, he's experiencing a small degree of paralysis from the No, oh no, Jeffy cried. The T8, but we don't expect this to be permanent, Gretchen continued. The spinal cord was not severed. It wasn't actually touched. Thankfully, the bullet missed it but grazed the vertebrae, which caused some swelling of the cord. Jeffy couldn't help the tears from flowing. Jeffy, you know as well as I that this type of paralysis doesn't have to be permanent. He's going to be okay. He's going to be as good as new, Gretchen said. Hart, Jeffy blubbered, reaching out her hand. He came to her and took her hand. She looked into his eyes and could tell that he was as upset and worried as she. She had to pull herself together for his sake. What he must be going through, what he must be thinking. Hart, I need to see him. He swallowed hard. I know how you're feeling, Jeffy. I feel the same way, but you can't travel for 3 days, and by then he will be back in the States. I can travel. No, you can't, both Gretchen and Hart said at the same time. You have a severe concussion, and you're not going anywhere or doing anything for 3 days. And after that, Hart chimed in, you're leaving. Leaving? You're being extracted. Extracted. Yes. Your father and Jason say they've seen enough. The moment you even suggested you were thinking about going back to your research, someone tried to take you out. They want you home where they can keep you safe. You said yourself they didn't try to take me out. They want me alive. You're being extracted, Hart said sternly. I can't leave. Not yet. I'm scheduled to put together 2 more medical facilities over the next 6 months. You don't have to be present to have that happen, and you know it. Now, I don't want any trouble from you, Jeffy. You're leaving. Frowning, she eyed him. His brown hair was neatly trimmed, his handsome features strong and chiseled, his mouth was set in a straight line, his body was like all the other Ameritech agents, honed with muscle. He'd used his body as a human shield last night to protect her. She hadn't been able to push him off her, and if he wanted her to leave, she probably wouldn't be able to fight him on it. He was upset and cross, and she couldn't blame him. Still, there was no way she could leave. Mirembe needed her. Jeffy realized that she had to employ some of that people smart she told Richard she didn't have. She drew a deep, calming breath. Okay, Hart, I understand, and I'm not going to give you any trouble on this. I'll go, but I need a small compromise. I gave my word to Mirembe that I would be here to see her twins born safely into this world. Well, will they be born within the next few days? She sighed, picking her words carefully. Well, actually, they could be. She's 7.5 months along. We don't expect her to go past 8 months, so she's only a few weeks away from delivering. That's all I'm asking for. 2 weeks. Hart rolled his eyes. It's not my decision, Jeffy. You present your case to your father and see what he has to say about it. But if it were up to me, I'd get you out of here as quickly as possible. Jeffy frowned. Well, it's not up to you now, is it? Nope. Still, my opinion will be given to your father. You'd want me to break my word? Mirembe will understand. Your life is important. She blew out a breath. Of course she knew that. Really, though, once she published her series of textbooks, there would be no stopping the medical revolution that would take place. So it wasn't as if silencing her would do anyone any good. All the info for those books was already backed up and held by her family. Her life wasn't that important, and as soon as the world realized that, the danger to herself would be over, unless they just wanted her dead for spite, which was entirely possible, for now she just wanted to keep her word to a special friend. Jeffy, Gretchen said, if her babies don't come before you have to leave, I swear to you that Richard and I will take special care of them. Jeffy sighed and nodded. Richard, how is he? Was he hurt at all? He has some cuts and abrasions, but he's okay. He came in earlier to check on you, but I talked him into getting some rest. Now, if you don't mind, I'd like to examine you, she added, glancing at Agent Akins. I'll be outside, he said quickly. Jeffy obliged Gretchen and laid still while the doctor checked her pupils, listened to her heart, palpitated her abdomen, and gently probed the large knot on the right side of Jeffy's forehead. Satisfied that her patient was on the mend, Gretchen left her with an admonition to rest. The moment she left, Jeffy struggled to a sitting position and called Hart to her. He came back in and approached the cot where she lay, a frown on his face. She reached out and took his hand. I'm sorry, she said, the tears welling in her eyes. It's my fault Chris is hurt, and I'm so sorry. Hart's expression softened. Jeffy, it's not your fault. It's our job. We expect to face danger every single day. We don't have to be here. We wanted to be here. We wanted this assignment, and both of us have had the opportunity to go in and have replacements, but we elected to stay. Look, I'm sorry too. I'm sorry I wasn't the one driving. I'm sorry I didn't see it coming. I'm sorry you were hurt. Chris would say the same thing. He's going to be okay, Jeffy. I have to believe that. Besides, isn't it you who was always preaching the positive thinking thing? She sniffed and gave a soft laugh. Well, yes, but no buts. Either do it or don't do it. That's what you say. Okay, no buts. Chris is going to be fine. He's going to make a complete and speedy recovery in Jesus' name. So there, it's done. That's that. Hart smiled. That's that. So it's just you and me for now? Hart shrugged. In a manner of speaking. What do you mean by that? Well, there are other agents around. Oh, yes, the third car. Are they okay? How is the agent who went in and stopped the gunman? He's fine. No scratches? Not a one. He must be very good. He is. He's one of Jason's elite. He worked very fast. Well, I guess he figured there was no time to waste, Hart said with a smile. And I guess there wasn't. He brought your pack to you early this morning. He did? I figured that was lost forever. Good. I was about to ask you if I might use your phone. Now I'll just ask if you could bring mine to me. Hart lifted the lid to her small trunk and pulled her backpack out and handed it to Jeffy. She fished inside for her phone and immediately dialed her father. Jeffy, Eric said when he answered. Yes, Daddy, it's me. Thank God you're all right. She smiled when she heard a feminine squeal in the background. And your mom says the same and wants to speak to you. Jeffy laughed. I'm sure she does. Okay, but first I want to tell you that I need to stay here a little longer. I'd rather you not, he said firmly. I know, but remember the family I told you about? I gave my word to Mirembe that I would be here when her babies are born. It'll only be a few more weeks. Can I please stay until then? If I said yes, your mother would skin me alive. Explain the situation to Mirembe. I'm sure she'll understand. As soon as you're recovered enough to travel, I'm pulling you. Now, that is my decision, and no pleading on your part will make me change my mind. Still, I realize you're an adult and have the freedom to do whatever you choose. However, let me remind you that we are a family, and we are all in this together, and the entire family feels the way I do. We want you safe. Although I understand the giving of your word, you must set priorities. Circumstances have changed since the giving of your word. You need to adjust. Jeffy sat silently contemplating her father's words. He was a wise man to whom she had always shown respect and obedience. He felt strongly that she should come home. Are you still there, baby girl? Yes, Daddy, I'm here. Okay, I'll come home. Still, I might need an extra day or two once I'm able to move around so that I can make some arrangements and pack up my belongings. A day. Nothing you have there is worth your life. She blew out an exasperated breath. Okay, a day. That's my girl. Love you, sweetheart. I love you, Daddy. Here's your mother. Bye. Jeffy? Hey, Mom. I've been so worried. I'm okay, really. Do you want to talk about what happened? No, not now. I'm pretty tired. It was scary, and I'm just sick over Chris being shot. Well, he's going to be okay. Yes, he is, Jeffy said, smiling at Hart. Well, if you want to talk, call. It doesn't matter what time it is. I will, Mom. Give my love to everyone. I will. And keep everyone safe, Jeffy implored, her voice choking on the emotion that suddenly welled up. We will. Don't worry. Baby, are you okay? Jeffy sniffed back tears. I bet you never thought when you were giving birth to me that one day this little baby is going to put your entire family in jeopardy. Oh, sweetheart, that's not how it is. When I held you in my arms for the first time, I knew that you came into this world for a very special reason. It's not your fault that greedy, horrible people are trying to stop you. We have to place the responsibility on their shoulders, not yours. You got that? Jeffy wiped the tears from her eyes. I guess I just needed to be reassured that you're not mad at me for bringing all this on you. Never, Jeffy. I love you, Mom. I love you too, baby. Please be careful. Will do. Bye, Mom. Jeffy glanced up at Hart, who'd been standing close by, and he took the phone from her hand when she held it out to him. You okay? He asked. She shrugged. I don't know why I feel so emotional. He moved close, and when her chin began to tremble, he wrapped his arms around her and pulled her against his chest and let her cry it out. New scene. 3 days later, while the children were at school in the village, Jeffy stood next to Mirembe, holding her hand as Dr. Todd examined her. Earlier that morning, Jeffy had been given a clean bill of health and an okay to travel. She had immediately asked Richard if he would check out Mirembe and the babies to see if her time was close. Well, she's already 4 centimeters dilated, he said as he used his other hand to press gently down on Mirembe's swollen abdomen. Mirembe gave a soft moan. She'd been having fairly strong contractions ever since Jeffy had returned from Kampala, but nothing regular. Jeffy just knew she would be able to see the babies born after all. An ultrasound had determined that they were healthy, well-formed baby boys who were in perfect position in the shared placenta. Both heads down, one slightly lower than the other. Marimbe had been placed on bed rest more than 2 weeks ago when she tried to move a table at the school and had experienced some pain and some minor bleeding. They talked her into coming to the camp and placed her, Sanyu, and Ballon in their own little tent at the far end of the compound, closest to Dr. Todd. The new clinic was now open, up and running, and when her time came, she would be just 2 minutes away from it. "Do you feel any pain?" Richard asked as he placed his hand on her belly. Marimbe shook her head. "Not really. Nothing difficult. I feel uncomfortable," she said slowly in her thick accent. Jeffy eyed Dr. Todd. She waited until he finished his exam and walked outside with him. Agent Akins, who'd been standing outside the tent, moved a few feet away in an effort to be discreet. "Is something wrong?" "Well, birthing twins is always difficult," Richard said. "I think she may be going into labor." "And that's a bad thing right now, isn't it?" Dr. Todd nodded. "Emotionally for her, it would be good to have it over with before you leave in the morning. However, physically, I'd like her to carry them at least a few more weeks." "Continue." "She's 33 weeks. That's 4 weeks earlier than I would like, but the tests and the ultrasounds show small but healthy boys with good lung development. We're going to have to keep our fingers crossed. I'm going to administer magnesium sulfate and see if I can keep her comfortable and keep her from having contractions for a few more weeks. And then when the time comes, I think I'd like to airlift her to a hospital. I don't want to take any chances." Jeffy nodded. "Well, thank you for that. I can't be here, and I feel just sick about that, but I can make sure you have everything you need to bring these babies safely into the world. Give it to me straight, Richard. Do you believe she's going to be okay?" "I do. She's strong. She's healthy. She's followed the diet. She's taken care of herself, except for that little incident at the school." Jeffy nodded. "Okay, then. You're the expert. I leave her in your good hands." Dr. Todd put his arm around Jeffy. "I know this hurts." Jeffy bit her lip to keep it from trembling. "Because I promised." "She understands. She told me to tell you that if you don't go and be safe, then she will not come to see you in America in the fall as planned." "Oh, really?" Jeffy said sarcastically. Richard smiled at her. "I swear that's what she said." "I did say that," Marimbe called from inside the tent. Grinning, Jeffy went back inside, arms outstretched. "One more hug." Marimbe obliged her. "I will see you in just a few months with my fat little boys." "I can't wait," Jeffy said. "I want a hug. I want a hug," Sanyu cried as she came running in. Jeffy turned and held her hands out. "Oh, no. I'm not leaving until the morning. I don't want to say goodbye to you until then." When Sanyu stopped and placed her hands on her hips, Jeffy scooped her up in a great big hug and spun her around. "Okay, one hug now. In the morning, bunches." Jeffy set her down and turned to Ballon. "Hello, my love," she said softly. Ballon nodded solemnly. He'd been subdued ever since he'd learned of Agent Coley being shot. Jeffy smiled at him. "I suppose you want a hug, too." He shook his head. "I will wait until morning," he said soberly. Jeffy knelt down in front of him and placed her hand on his head and leaned her forehead against his. She stayed that way for several moments, using her psychic ability to do what her brothers termed her Vulcan mind-melding trick. She not only had the ability to read minds with amazing accuracy, but she discovered several years ago that if she gave a mental push of love and healing, she had been able to lift the spirits of her subject, with one little side effect, the taking on of their emotions into herself. And when she pulled away from Ballon, she had tears in her eyes, but it was worth it, because Ballon offered her a small smile. Jeffy rose and Ballon moved closer to Agent Akins, who placed his hand possessively around the boy's shoulders. "Well, I guess I have a few more people that I'd like to see before I leave," she said brightly. "What about me?" Richard asked. "I'll see you in the morning." Sighing, she made her way up the hill to the clinic to say her farewells to Gretchen, Dr. McTee, Ada, and several others, And afterward she headed back through the compound, stopping in the mess tent to speak with some med students and interns. She'd been tempted to ride into the village to bid farewell to the dozens of friends she'd made over the past months, but her exit was not supposed to be common knowledge, and yet by the time she got back to her tent she found it full of little gifts. Delighted, she sat on her cot and began going through some of the new treasures. 2 necklaces of exquisite handmade beads, 3 dolls wearing the beautiful Ugandan dress, several pictures painstakingly drawn by children at the school on the highly valued paper with the crayons she herself had purchased for the children, many fruits, a lovely orange robe with green trim, notes, letters. Apparently she had touched their lives. She wondered if they realized just how much they had touched hers. She pulled out some paper and began writing a long letter to let them know just how she felt about all of them. And by the time she finished, it was dinner time. Hart escorted her to the mess tent, where she ate with some of the most heroic, wonderful people in the world, her fellow doctors, nurses, interns, and college students. There were more hugs, more promises to write and stay in touch, more admonishments for her to stay safe and to keep on the, quote, golden path. Exhausted by the time she returned to her tent, she stretched out on her cot and closed her eyes. Even though it was because of greed and hatred and violence that she was having to leave, she felt peaceful and comforted by the love that had been shown to her over the course of the day. Her mind wandered to the next day and her trip home and seeing her family again. She missed them more than words could describe. She had 2 nieces that had just turned 1 that she'd seen only through a webcam. All of their faces drifted through her mind, her parents, and then Ricky and Bree, and Eric and Taylor, and Mark and Bella and their kids, Jojo and Logan and little Emily, Joey and Breeze with Sophia and Kelston. She couldn't wait to be in their circle of love again. Given her psychic abilities, she would later wonder why she never had an inkling that the next day's plans would never happen. And that is the end of chapter 4. Bum, bum, bum.